In this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a magazine cover using Photoshop. First, I need to go and find a sample of a magazine cover that I wish to recreate. You can also make one of your own. You can make your magazine, call it whatever you want. I could call it idtprof illustrated and have a big photo of myself. But rather than doing that, I'm going to look for something with pretty people. And speaking of which, I guess I can look for a People magazine cover. So I'm going to open up a new tab and search for People magazine covers. I can see where here's the current one. Jennifer Aniston is now the People's Most Beautiful Woman of 2016 again. I'm going to search for more images and just take a look at what we got, and I think I'm going to do the Steve Jobs one. I'll visit the page so that I see the whole image. And now that I can see the whole image, I can right-click on it and tell it to copy that image. I'll go back to Photoshop, where I have already created a blank document. This document, by the way, when I created it, I went to File, New, created a letter size. Currently, the image size is 8.5 inches by with a resolution of 150 pixels. I can paste the image that I just copied. I'll go to Edit, Paste. I could have pressed Ctrl V as well. Here's the magazine. It's not quite as large as the image I have, but that's fine because I'm only using it for reference. I'm going to press Ctrl T. That's the free transform tool. I'm pressing the Shift button and holding it, and I'm going to enlarge this so that it fits the screen. Just enlarge it a little bit more right there. And now I have this reference point. I'm going to be looking for a few things, a few elements to fill out this magazine. First of all, I'm going to need to find the People magazine logo, and that should be freely available on the internet at some point. I'm sure that there's plenty of images of Steve Jobs that I can go and find. Same thing with the couples here. And if you don't want to use the same images that are already in the page, by all means find your own. You don't need to go and find the UPC symbol. If you want to, you can find the generic one. It doesn't need to be exact. I'll be looking mostly at placing text, placing images, and just giving it a solid look. So I'll go back to my browser and let me do a search then for People magazine logo. And I'm adding an extra piece of verbiage here, not only a People magazine logo EPS, I mean not just a logo but rather a logo EPS. And EPS is an encapsulated PostScript file. Those are Adobe files that are vector files. That means that you can redraw the logo at pretty much any size using Photoshop. I'm going to click on my first option. That's a website called Brands of the World. It's fairly popular. You can find many popular logos here. I'll visit that page. Wait for it to load. And here is the People magazine logo. It tells me some information about it, and I'll find that there's a fine print that I need to agree. I'm probably selling my rights to some corporation in China, but I'll say I'm not a robot and tell it to download. Waiting for that to come in. I'm going to place it on my desktop. I'll click Save. And now I have this People magazine.eps file saved. I'll return to Photoshop and open up the EPS file. Go to File, Open. I saved it on my desktop. And here is People magazine. You see it has a different kind of icon attached to it. It's an EPS file. Click on Open. It wants to know how we want to redraw it. I know that this magazine cover is 8.5 inches wide at 150 pixels. It's also RGB, so I'll match some of these things. I'll say that the resolution should be 150, that the mode should be RGB, and the width, well, this is going to be like 2/3, maybe 4/5 of the cover. And I know it's 8.5, and if my math works out, I think that as long as I get it to be 6 inches wide, that it should be fine. I'll click OK. and then I get the logo open. Now that it's open, it's a transparent file. I can see the checkerboard behind it. I will select all of this image, get the marching ants around it, and I'll copy it. Edit copy. Could have also pressed Control C. Return to my cover, where this is only, once again, a reference image. I'm going to paste what I just copied. Edit paste, and there it is. It's a little bit, well, it's right on the dot maybe. It's close enough, so I'll just move it. I'm using my cursor keys to place it on top of the other one. And I notice that there's an effect on this one. If I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that there's a shadow that is cast on Steve Jobs' forehead. I'll be sure to add that at some point. I'm going to go into layer 1, which I'll double click on the word layer 1, and I'll rename this as original, just so that I know that that's what that is. I'm going to change the opacity to something else other than 100%. I'll lower it to somewhere above 50. This one's at 59. 60 would be fine. I can still see the images behind, but I can see what's in front a lot better. I'm going to double click on layer 2 and rename this as logo, so I can also go back and find it. You'll notice I have my rulers out. If your rulers are not showing, you can get them out by clicking on View and asking it for rulers. You can also press Control R and your rulers will appear. Rulers will come in handy because, at least with this magazine, there's a lot of squares. There's a lot of lines that you can follow. So I'm going to click on the left ruler, my vertical ruler, and drag. And I'm going to find the edge of Steve Jobs' photo, and then that will give me an anchor for me to use later when I'm drawing the background. There's that blue background. Steve Jobs will fit inside of this area. I'm going to return now to my browser, and I'll do a search for a photo of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, look for images. And I'll make sure that I'll click on my search tools, and for size, get a large image. It doesn't have to be exactly the same image. If you can find one that sort of looks like it, that's fine. Otherwise, find one that you think might work. I'm clicking on the thumbnail with the image. This is only a thumbnail, so I'll click on View Image, and now I see the image at full resolution. If I were to click on top of this, then I'd see that it's indeed a much larger image. I'm going to click on the right button of my mouse and select Copy Image. I'll return to my Photoshop, and I'll put on top of the original one. Be sure that you're aware of where you're placing your files. Clicking on original because I want, this is actually going to be my background, so I can even delete the background layer. Well, maybe not, because since it's transparent, it helps out. I'll click on original, and anything that I paste, I want for that to be on top of this image. I'll edit and paste. Here's Steve Jobs. I sort of remember where the other picture was. I mean, he was looking the other way. This might need to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit, pressing Control T, my free transform tool, and reducing this. I always use my Shift button. I'm holding down the Shift button, and then he is being reduced and keeping the dimensions correctly. I then moved it around a little bit. I feel like in this area he could be centered better. I'm going to click on the check mark on top. That means accept my changes. I still need this area to be clear. That's where the teaser boxes are going to go. I'm going to use my square marquee tool, and I'm going to select a square starting outside of the image. I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and just select the area that would make up the image where the photo would go. I'm still in layer 1. I'm going to apply a layer mask to that based on my selection, and now I can see the right area of the magazine. That's where the teaser boxes will go. I'm going to rename my layer 1 by double clicking on it and saying Steve Jobs, or just Steve. If you remember, I said that the logo had a shadow behind it. I can take care of that really quick while I'm thinking about it. I'm going to select my logo. I'm going to go to Layer Effects and ask it to create a drop shadow. I'll move this out of the way so we can see what's going on. And I see that I have a drop shadow. It's currently at 90 degrees, so it's going straight down. It's on multiply. I'm going to change the distance a little bit so that it's a little bit farther away from the logo. And then I'm going to play with the spread and the size a little bit so that it sort of matches what was on the other image. I'll get it a little closer. Instead of 20, maybe 15. And I think that that's going to work out. This is what the original image looked like if I go back to 100%. So I don't want to get too fancy with that. I think that that's going to work okay. So half the magazine really is done by now. Now I have to think about the boxes on the right. I'm going to bring in new lines. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that I can see what's going on. I'm going to bring in a line that tells me this first photo should be somewhere around there. And I'm going to bring in additional lines for the second photo because I can see Elizabeth Taylor only goes that far. And so with the one with Demi and Ashton below there. I'm going to move that until it's on the right place. Somewhere in here. There you go. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it. I'm then going to select the area for the first photo. I'm using my marquee tool. I'm starting somewhere outside of the image, clicking and dragging all the way to the edge of the Steve Jobs picture because that's how far this image goes. Of course, I can't hurry up too much because I still don't have a Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively photo. I can go back and look for that or just look for celebrity pictures. I'm going to make sure that I don't just randomly look for celebrity pictures so that my results are acceptable. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. Is that her name? Yes. How uncool is your teacher? I don't know who these people are. Click on images. They don't have to be as large as the original one. So I'll say size and ask for medium. And I think that we can use this one. I'll view that image and I'll right click and copy it. I'll come back to my cover. Now I'm still on top of the original, but now I have Steve Jobs on top of that, although this area is masked, so it will not be covered by the Steve Jobs photo. I can then go say edit, and I can do a paste special so that in this area that I have selected, I can say paste into, and the image will be dropped there. You'll notice that I now have a mask layer that's hiding the original image in that square. That being done, I can click on my move tool so that then I can freely move the image inside. I can also apply the free transform tool by going to Control T, and I know that I've been using the shortcut all this time. You can always go to edit and say free transform, Control T, hold and press my shift key, and I'll make this image smaller. Notice how I'm working from the corners and not from the sides. The corners are always better anchors to resize your images. Once I get it to the size that I want, I can double click, or I could have pressed the check mark that was up there. And then I'm done with the first photo. I'm going to scroll below and I see that Elizabeth Taylor is next. Before I look for her picture, I'll rename layer 1 as picture 1, or I can say top picture. I'll just say picture 1. I'll click back on the original so that the next thing that happens actually will happen inside, or rather on top of original but below picture 1. I'll click on my marquee tool, the rectangular marquee, and I could either bring a ruler below here or not. I can just, since I've already used the ruler on the left, I can guesstimate And notice how whenever I do a selection at the edge of the page, I don't start it from the very edge. Instead, I'm outside of the page, because any click and drag that you do will then just incorporate the selection right into the edge. I'm going all the way to the bottom of the picture, and I have that area selected. Now I need to find an Elizabeth Taylor picture. So I'll return to my browser. My next picture search will be for Elizabeth Taylor, and let's see what appears in my images. I have some nice vintage shots, and I do believe that that's a vintage shot here. I'll make sure that I find a color photo, not Cleopatra necessarily. I'll get this glamour shot, view the image, right click, copy the image, return to Photoshop, and since I already have a selection going, I can simply go to Edit, Paste Special, and paste into. Now my photo of Elizabeth Taylor is inside the new mask. I'll zoom out just a little bit. You can press Ctrl- to zoom out. I'm using a different tool. And I'll press Ctrl-T while I'm in this layer. It's a large picture, so I'll press and hold my Shift key, bring it down in size from the left. Same thing on the bottom left corner. I think that that's the smallest I want to get it because I don't want it to shrink too much. And then using my Move tool, I will put her in the center. Press Enter, and then I have my picture 2. I'll rename layer 1 as picture 2. For picture 3, I need a third photo, Demi and Ashton. So let me make that quick search, Demi and Ashton, see if anything just pops out. Images for Demi and Ashton, and let's see, how about not that one, not Paris Hilton. We all know how that ends. Well, here's one from people.com. I'll view this image. It's a little bit smaller. Let's see if it fits. I'll right click and copy that image. Come back, be on top of original. This is my active layer. I'll use my square marquee again, and I'll make a selection on that image and do the final edit, paste special, paste into. It's just a little bit smaller than the space that I have, so it's not going to make too much difference. When I go into my Move tool, press Ctrl-T, the free transform tool, press and hold the Shift key, and make this just a little bit larger so that it fits in that space. I'll click the check mark, and now I have my 3 photos. I also have the main photo, and all I really need to do, if you want to do the UPC, you can do that, but very important, I need to type in all the text. I mean, this is a magazine cover, and they're not as popular as they used to be, but still the purpose is to read them. Make sure that you have plenty of text that explains what's going on in your magazine cover. Pretty pictures are just half of the effort. I'm turned off all the logos and photos on top of the original one so that I can read what's going on, so that I can reproduce this. I'm going to be on top of the very top logo. That's the very top layer on top. Go to my text tool and start to draw some text. I'll start with the things on the right. I'll click somewhere near the center and type in the names Ryan Reynolds. Obviously this font that I'm using now looks nothing like the one that they actually use, but that's fine because I can always change it. And Blake Lively. I'm going to click Select and All to select all the text. This Elephant Regular font is not going to work out. If I know anything about fonts, what I'm looking at is a sans serif. I couldn't tell you what the family is. Let's see if anything pops out as I come down. If it doesn't, I know that one that could actually work okay would be Impact. That's a standard Microsoft font. So I'm looking, these are in alphabetical order, so I'm F, G, H, I, and Impact should be nearby. Impact Regular is right there. Impact Regular, if you've ever visited the internet, this is the font that's used on memes. Very easy to read. While I can manually double click and select a new font size, because I'm going to be using lots of fonts, I want to take the easy way. I'm going to treat the text as an image, so I want to make sure that I'm using the Move tool, not the text tool, that I am on the correct layer. This one says Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. And then I'm going to press Ctrl T, the free transform tool, and I'm going to transform this as I would any other graphic. I'm going to press and hold Shift and bring it down in size. It's going to be about yay wide. I click on the check mark. I zoom in a little bit so that I can see more of this. One thing for sure, what I can see in the background is that the leading, that is the space between the lines, is a lot lower in the original file. This is where I switch back into text mode. I'll double click the T in the Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively layer. That selects all the text. And then I'm going to go into Window and open up my character window. Character window will then give me several other options that are not available on the Properties tab on top. I'm going to be able to change it from Auto, which is what it's currently trying to do. And since this type is currently at about 20 points, let's get started at 24. That's too much. 18 is a little bit better, and I bet that whatever's next, well, actually 14 is too much. How about 16? 16. I typed it in regular. Well, 17 it is. And I'll press the Enter key to accept that. I'll then move the window out of the way by just reducing it. I'll go back into my Move tool. I think I seem to remember that this was yellow. So I'll double click on the T again and I'll select the text color above and just pick a yellow. Something like that. It's nice and shiny. Right after that, I'm still using the text tool. I'm clicking at the very end of the line. I'll press Enter again. I'll type in the next two lines, new, press Return to go to the next line, romance, question mark. The second headline is a lot larger. I can always select that text and tell it to change size. I'll go from 20 or 19.55 to 24, which maybe is wide enough. Now I need to return to my character window and play with this leading, giving it a little bit more. How about 24? 24 is too much. 22 seems to be better. Also, this text below was not yellow, it's white, so I'll click on my color palette for the text and I'll select white. Another thing that I seem to remember is that there are shadows behind the text. So in the text layer, I can go into my effects and select drop shadow, just like we did with the logo. These are the settings for People magazine logo. I'll change the distance to something smaller. Same thing with spread and size until I get something that's a little bit more acceptable. And I think that maybe this will work. I'll change the opacity, or rather, yeah, the opacity and the multiply to something higher so that it's darker. You can't see it, but there's an OK here that I can click. I'll minimize this again. What's good about creating one box is that you can copy it and use it again. so that I don't have to go through the same problems below here. These the type below here is going to be different colors, but I can still use this text. A couple of things that I can do, and I'll show you both ways, or two ways at least. I'm pressing and holding my Alt key. If you're in a Macintosh, you would be pressing the Option key, which is basically the equivalent for the Mac. So pressing that key, I'm also pressing Shift so that when this happens, actually it'll go down in a straight line. In that way I can click, hold down my mouse button, and you'll notice that there are all kinds of vertical lines appear. That just means that the text is coming down straight down. I'm going to try to get it about the same height as the text below, and then release all the buttons that I was pressing, including the mouse buttons, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to hide that temporarily. These are the same fonts basically, and although we're not using exactly the same fonts, we're using something similar. I know that the text on top is going to be a down style. That means the words start out with a capital letter followed by lowercase letters. Elizabeth Taylor's Jewels, they don't have a shadow, not in this picture, because she's wearing a lighter top. Then Amazing, Auction, Sneak Peek is going to be in all caps in white. That's the text that we already have here below. Our text on top is yellow, but that's the one that I'm going to select first. I'll double click the T in this copy, which still reads the same thing as the original text. By double clicking it becomes active, but I can click on the Y, highlight the text starting with the Y all the way to the R. You could have also started with the R and gone to the right. Obviously if your text says something else, start by whatever letter is the first one. I'll press delete so that I can see again what's going on. Elizabeth on the first line, enter. Taylor's Jewels. This text is a little bit larger than the one I need, so I'll highlight it. First of all, change it from yellow to black. Click OK. And change the size from 19.95 to something more manageable, starting with 18. And maybe that'll work. I'll click on that, and it would help if I could spell Elizabeth. It has an E right there. Use my move tool and just move this up a little bit. Pressing the Shift key again so that it stays in the same place. Now this looks a little odd because it's black text with a black dark shadow. So I can't take off the shadow from this text and keep it on the bottom text. They're both part of the same layer. So one thing that I can do is, for now, I can scroll down a bit, zoom out a little bit as well, and I'll make yet another copy of this layer by pressing the Alt key, pressing the Shift key as well, clicking down and dragging it. By doing that, now I have two copies of Elizabeth Taylor's Jewels New Romance. I want the original one. That's the one on top. That's this layer here. I'll double click to select all the text, and I know that I only want Elizabeth Taylor's Jewels, so I'll highlight New Romance and press the backspace key. Now I only have Elizabeth Taylor's Jewels, the top line. I can switch next to my other layer that has the same text, except it's got the black letters and the white letters still with the shadows. I'll double click the T on this layer to select all the text. I only need New Romance, so I'm going to highlight Elizabeth Taylor's Jewels, press the backspace key, and I'm still in the top line. I could keep it as that, but I'm going to press the right key so that I'm before the N in New, and press the backspace. That way everything comes up to the top. I'll highlight using my I'm using Shift and my cursor keys. I could also just use the mouse and click and drag to highlight. And I'll type in the text, Amazing, Auction, Sneak Peek, exclamation point. I'll go back to my Move tool and press and hold Shift, click and drag up. And then I have my Amazing Auction Sneak Peek, which is just a little bit too large. I can always double click on that, take it from 24 down to maybe 18, and that might work, except the leading is too high. I'll open up my window character again, and I'll change the leading from 18, actually from 22 down to 18. That'll fit in a little bit better. I could even make this text 20 probably. And press enter, click on the check mark. I'll minimize my character, and not perfect, but I think that it'll work fine. Now, how is all this looking on the magazine? Let me turn on the rest of my pictures, and it's not looking bad. Elizabeth Taylor's jewels could still, I could still get rid of the of that drop shadow. So I'm going to press on the right mouse button while I'm on top of the word Elizabeth, and that'll actually tell me Elizabeth Taylor's jewels, this is the layer you want. I'll click on that. That layer becomes active. I'll see that this is the effect that's being applied. I can either turn it off by clicking on the effects eyeball, or I could do what? I could right click and say give me the effects again, and then just turn it off here. I'll click OK. I'll press Ctrl 0 to fit the whole magazine cover, and then I'll turn off the logo and all the pictures again. I'm just clicking and dragging down the eyeballs on the left. I have one more headline to go to, and it's different. Demi and Ashton in white but lowercase letters, and then they're working on their marriage in all caps. For this, I think I'm still going to use the text from the very top. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. I'll right click on that. It shows me where that layer is. I'll click on that to select it. I'll press and hold my Alt key, your Option key on a Mac. I'm also pressing the Shift key, clicking and dragging this down all the way to the bottom. I can see right away that I'm going to need to reduce the size of the fonts, and maybe even move them a little bit here so that they're centered on top of this other text. And what I'll do is I'll actually double click the T to the T in the layer that selects all the text. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, I'll highlight, and then I'm going to cut that. Edit, cut. I'll press the right key so that I go to the N before new. I'll press the backspace key. That gets rid of that blank space on top. And then once again, I'm using my cursor keys to go to the end of the line after the question mark. I'll press return to start a new line, and then I can either press Ctrl V or say edit and paste. So now I have white text on top of yellow. I guess it's moved a little bit. I can move it back, and since now I do have the text in the right order, while I can see both of them, I will double click the whole text. I see that I still have a space before new, so I'm using my cursor keys to go all the way to the top, then right to go back to before the N. I'll press the backspace. That deletes the blank space. I'm going to press, well, rather than pressing anything, I'm just going to use the mouse and click and drag. And I'll highlight New Romance, the two lines, and replace them with one, Demi and Ashton. I could use the same font size as this one on top, although it's a different color. That doesn't matter, but I can figure it out. I'll highlight Demi and Ashton. I'm at 24. I'll take it down to 18. That works. I'll highlight Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, and I'll replace that with the text working on space, or rather return their marriage. I can make this a little bit smaller, from 19.55 maybe to 18, just small enough that when I use my move tool to drag this below, pressing shift, I think that works okay. Now at the end, like I said, you can do the UPC or not. It's up to you. Let me see if I can maybe find that people UPC. Well, I'm getting all kinds of weird things, but here's one. Doesn't matter, it's the New York Times. I'll view image, right click, copy the image, come back to Photoshop, and the very top layer I'll press Ctrl V. That's too big, so I'll press Ctrl T, drag it down here, press and hold Shift, make this smaller, about right there so that it doesn't invade into the Steve Jobs picture. Click on the check mark. Now you'll notice I have a mess of layers on my layer panel. So one thing that I can do is, well, that layer 2, that's the UPC that I just added. I'm going to double click on the words layer 2 and replace that with UPC. I'm going to click and hold my mouse button and drag it all the way to the top so that it's away from the text. You'll notice that I have all these effects on the text. Also, I can click on this little arrow at the very right of each one of these layer effects. That will hide them. That starts to help out the mess. And then I can click on the very top layer. I don't have to double click. I just want to select the layer. I'm going to press Shift and press the next layer so that it's also selected. Same thing with the next one, and finally all my text layers are selected. This will come in handy because I can now go into my hamburger icon, the contextual menu on the top right, and say to create a new group from layers. Currently it wants to name it Group 1. I'm going to call this Text. And by doing that, a new folder was created. It's called Text. If I wanted to see the contents, I would click on the drill to the left. And now I can see all my text is actually inside of that folder. I can always go back and highlight it, edit it, do whatever. What's cool too is that I can hide it all at once by clicking the eyeball on the left. Well, let's see, Control 0 will show me the whole thing. Let's see what my picture is looking like. And I only now need the main text that goes on top of the main story. So once again, I'm going to click and hide everything above that. I know that my people logo is there. I have now just a few lines to go to. I'll click on my text. I'll make sure that it's white because most of these are white. I'll click OK. And I'm going to type maybe just one of these blocks of text. I'll click next to where it starts, say his, and it looks as if my text is centered. I'm going to make sure that that's left justified. That's the left icon up here. His, private, this is a down style as well, world. And although the original font is a lot thinner, I'll just keep on this because I already have used this font on the right. And that in size at least looks to work okay. I'm zooming in. I could add this to the text now by clicking on the drill and just clicking and dragging that text layer into that folder. It's hidden currently, so it goes away. So I'll just make it visible again by clicking on the eyeball. I want to be on his private world because his brave battle is the same size and style. I can keep on copying the text by pressing and holding the Control key, the Shift key, and then bringing it down. And I'll make sure that it matches the height. I'll double click on this. It's his brave. Let me make sure that I'm on the right line. Next line, battle. I'll go back to my move tool. I don't have to move this back into the text because it was already there since my copy was made while inside of the text folder. Press Ctrl 0. I'm getting very close to finishing. 1955 to 2011 probably is the same size as these, so I'll click and hold down the Control key and drag it to this side. I'll highlight that text and type the words, or rather the numbers, 1955 to 2011. Seems to be a little bit smaller. A highlight, I'll press Control A, the same thing as select all, selected all the text. I'll change the size down to 30. Use my move tool and put that in that area. Now I'm looking at these little graphics that they have, these little lines. I may or may not be able to reproduce these really quick, but one thing that I'm sure of is that they're blue, like the blue in the people logo. So I'm going to make that visible again, and I can see the blue around people that I copied. I'm going to find my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to hover on top of the blue around the people logo. I'll click on that. You can see it's telling me that it finds a couple of colors, one of them being blue. As soon as I do that, then my foreground color has turned to blue, and that's going to come in handy in multiple ways. I'm going to zoom in. I'm still inside of the text, and maybe I want to stay here because I feel like these little lines are actually going to be part of the text. And I see that they're actually rounded. They have rounded points. And to copy these, I'm going to use the shape tool at the bottom. We haven't used this before in class, but it's fairly easy to use. I'm going to click and see my options. I have a rectangle tool. I have a rounded rectangle tool, which is probably what these are. I could have picked any of the others, but rounded rectangle tool will work. I'm going to hover on top, and I have all kinds of options up here to play with. The fill is currently the color of the foreground color. It's going to have no stroke, although there will be a 3-point area around that. And then, since these are rounded corners, we can specify a radius, but I'm going to see what starts to draw right now. I'm going to pretend that this is actually a square, and it would go all the way out to the corner on this side. Click and drag, and actually these will match fairly well. I'll let go after I finish drawing, and now I have a rounded rectangle image in its own layer. It's called Rounded Rectangle 1. I'll click on my Move tool. I can hide the properties. Hover on top of the rectangle that I just drew. Do the same process as I did with the fonts. I'm pressing and holding the Alt key and the Shift key, clicking and dragging, and I just made a copy of that. That will work. Just below the text, pressing Control 0 to zoom out, and just like I copied the text that's over here with the years of his life, I'll click, hold my Control key, and drag, and this should actually try to center below the text. Not so much below, or rather, it won't try to center with the image behind it because it's only there for reference, but it's now centered below the actual text that I typed in. I now am down to 3 elements that are missing, and I can either choose to bring back up everything or hide everything, and I'm going to hide as much as I can just so that I don't mess up anything that I've already done. So the first thing that I'd like to do then is the main one, the main title, The Life and Genius of Steve Jobs. I'll use my text tool again. I'm on Left Justify. I'll click close to the life and genius of and type in the life. Let's go to the next line, and I'm not seeing anything, and that's because I don't even know where I am. I am in the text folder that I hid, but now it's live again. I can see it. I still have the blue, as in people blue. I'm going to make sure that this is going to be some sort of yellow. I'll use the color palette for the text. Choose a yellow. Click OK. The life. Press return to go to the next line. And genius of. I'll highlight that text, and I'll make it larger. From 30 go to 36, and maybe that'll work okay. It's not too bad. It could be a little bit larger maybe. I'll double click on the T again and go up to, well, I'll type it in, 42, and that might work a little bit better. It needs a little more leading, so I'll double click on the text to highlight it, and bring back my window character. Make sure that I have more leading than what I'm letting right now. 36 would work better. I'm going to copy this text just because, you know, why click again on text. I'll double click on the text layer and type in the word Steve. Press return and type jobs. This needs to be white. So I'll change the color in the text from yellow to white. Click OK. And I'm going to use my move tool. At the very beginning of the semester, I told you that your move tool would be your best friend because it does so many things and it asks for so little. I'm pressing Control T, a free transform tool, and I'm going to click and hold the Shift key. In this way, I don't have to worry about the leading anymore because it's just, as it's making it larger, it's taking into account that the leading also needs to grow. So it'll look okay once I press enter. So that was one of the big elements below. I have 2 more to go. This first one's going to be an easy one. I'm still inside of the text folder. I'm going to make sure that all the texts are visible. Well, maybe not yet, but that I'm on the very top one. I'll click on my marquee tool, rectangular marquee, or maybe I could use the marquee tool. I could have also used the rectangle tool. Either one. The rectangle tool, one of the differences is that I want to save this blue for later, so I'm going to use the marquee tool. And I'm going to just make this quick selection right here for that little square, and it looks as, I don't remember the original picture, but if I look at the original picture, I can see that it's a reddish color. Okay, that's not what I wanted to click. I wanted to view the image. So it's kind of somewhere between orange and red. I'll go back, and somewhere above Steve Jobs, I'm going to create a new layer because it's not text that I'm adding. It's actually going to be a graphic. And that layer, I'm going to fill it, edit, fill. Instead of content aware and contents, I'll replace this with color. Color will then give me a palette where I can choose sort of an orangey red. I need to get closer to the red, somewhere around here, and I think it's more like a tomato red. Right there, click OK, and OK, and then that fills it. I then need to put in some text on top of that, so I'll hide that layer momentarily. Farewell to an American Original. I can turn off my selection, select and deselect. I already typed in some words here, his private world and his brave battle. They're way down here, but I'm going to make that active so that I can see it, and most importantly, copy it. I'm pressing and holding Control as well as the Shift key. It's not the right size, but still it's going to work. You'll notice that this is way below the box. It needs to be above the box because otherwise you won't be able to see it. If I turn on the box right now, it hides it. So I'm going to click and hold the layer that I just copied and drag it all the way to the top above layer 2, which, by the way, by now you could have changed the name from layer 2 to red box. I'll even turn it back on and I can see it a little bit better. Of course, I'm not going to turn it on all the way because I need to see what it still says. I'll move his private world out of the way so that I can edit this. Double click, farewell, return to and return American Original. I'll select all of that text, select all in the menu, and make sure it's centered. I need to make this smaller, and I'll do the same. I'll use the same trick as the other one. I'm going to use my move tool, press Control T, press and hold my Shift key, and make this smaller by dragging from the corners, and then that way my letters still look okay. using my cursor keys to center that, pressing enter to accept. I'll turn on the box so that I can bring it back. I need to be in the red box layer. And I just need to, I forgot, one of these is yellow. Farewell is white, to an American Original is yellow. I'll double click the T, highlight to an American Original, and press the yellow, click OK. Almost done. One final thing, and that's the date, October 24, 2011. It's tiny text, and that looks more like Arial, so I'm going to, for the first time in this assignment, switch text. I'll click on my text, I'll select Arial, make sure that it's an Arial bold, and just type in, make sure that it's white and not blue, click OK. October 24, 2011. Press Ctrl A to select all. I'm pressing Ctrl Shift and the less than key. That will make it smaller. If you click on the greater than key, it will make it larger. Why didn't I tell you that earlier, you may be asking? It's a good question. I feel like people get confused if I throw out too much information. I think that my box or my text is off a little bit. I'm going to select the text again, make sure that I'm in that layer, press Ctrl T, and make it a little bit smaller, and then that'll fit better. Oh, I see what happened. It changed the font. It's now Arial. And well, I can change that or not. I think that by now we've talked for almost an hour. But yeah, I'll change it to Impact Regular, and then just make it a little bit larger so that it fits correctly. Now you can reveal all your layers. So from the very bottom, I'm going to click and drag up. I'll hide the text. And now we have new problems because this is a different image. Steve Jobs is on a much lighter background. But we can fix that. We can add a little bit of contrast. I'll open up the text. Make sure that I can find his private world. And once that layer is selected, I can click on the effects icon, give it a drop shadow, and I have already moved the angle a little bit to minus maybe 35 or so, and the distance I'll change to 3 just so that it's a little bit further away. The spread can stay fairly low, maybe 10. The size, I think that should work okay. I'll click OK, and now to also apply the same effect, I'll right click on FX and tell it to copy the layer style, go into the His Brave Battle layer right here, right click and tell it to paste the layer style. Same thing for the Life and Genius of, right click, paste layer style. And then now you can read the text a little bit better. The only text that's suffering is the date on top. I'll find October 24, 2011, double click it and change that from white to black. Clicking OK. And the final thing here would be I'm going to hide the text. And we have been looking at the blue background of the original all this time. So I'm going to click on Original, create a new layer. It's just a blank layer, and this is, I'm just going to fill it with the blue that I saved from before. This is the people blue. Since nothing is selected in Photoshop, it's one of those weird things. Since nothing is selected, everything's selected. So I'll tell it to edit and fill. It's going to fill everything since nothing is selected, with the contents being the foreground color. That's the blue that I had already picked. Click OK, and now I get much more vibrant blue in the back. So we have recreated a magazine cover using existing graphics and pictures from the internet. Don't publish this to sell it, please. It's for your own good. I'm sure that, you know, if I get a letter from the Apple people, I'll be sure to comply to their orders. And remember that for this exercise, if you chose to create this magazine or a People magazine like it, you still need to make one more and turn them both in for grade.